Andy Benoit, Sports Illustrated. He analyzed all 32 teams' picks. We'll break them down. We'll take a look at the Eagles. And, of course, Andy, everybody seems to be focusing in on pick number 50. Have you ever heard of draft 53, the most polarizing pick of the entire draft?
Yeah, it's close. It's right up there with it's either that or it's obviously what Green Bay did, and that's what everybody's talking about. And I understand why. Those were fascinating selections.
Yeah, the Green Bay thing has a little bit more merit considering, Aaron's 36 years old. You just signed Carson, and he's 27, and I guess that's where the difference kind of lies. I mean, Aaron's 36. He did the same thing when Brett was there. Jalen Hurts, is he drafted to sit there for 2-3 years and become the next quarterback, or is he a bona fide just gadget player?
Well, I would think, and one thing I would mention is Rodgers. He's much older than Wentz, but their contracts are similar. Those guys are signed for about the same amount of time, and Rodgers is actually much more expensive than QB than in some regards. So I think Love will sit there behind Rodgers, which we can all see. That's pretty obvious. We can all see that. As far as whether Hurts will do that in Philadelphia, what's interesting is when the Eagles last needed a backup QB, like really needed them. It was 2017. We need Nick Foles in here for several weeks. Carson Wentz is not going to finish the season. What helped them a lot was Foles. You could run the same offense with him that you did with Carson Wentz. So you didn't have to adjust. Now, Foles was not as gifted as Wentz, and he's not going to run all the stuff the same way. But all the plays and all the designs the whole offseason in recent years practicing, everybody's still able to do that. When your backup QB is different than your starting QB, if it's let's say Jalen Hurts is wildly different than Wentz in a lot of ways, I think you could say he is, then you're changing your system if that guy comes on the field. And some teams like that because, all right, well, now we changed. The defense will see something from us that they haven't seen before. I think a lot of teams, and my guess was the Eagles were this way, they'd rather have that backup who is similar to their starter because they want to have continuity, and at least the other guys are still running the plays we've been practicing. So that's what surprises me about Hurts is I don't know if he's an ideal backup for Wentz, which leads me to believe he's probably here because they've got some special things in mind for how they want to evolve their offense and maybe add some gadgetry to it.
Yeah, and I wonder, the one other thing is, that contract that you mentioned, Wentz 2022, they can kind of get out of this deal. He's been injury prone. Do they look at him over the next 2 years and kind of evaluate whether or not he is their longer term guy?
I think if you ask them that question right now, they would say, no, absolutely not. He's our guy. There are not 3 or 4 guys more talented than him in the NFL. He's elite. And I think they'd be telling you the truth. Let's say Wentz has 2 more years that have kind of gone like the recent years, and he's not available at all times, and you wonder about his health. Then it's a different conversation, no matter how much the Eagles like him. It has to be at that point. So to answer your question, yeah, they'll evaluate this in a couple years for sure. They're also a contender right now, though. I mean, they were in the playoffs a year ago. They won the division. Keep in mind, they had like 8 backups in on offense by the end of the year, and they were still in contention, actually won several games down the stretch to get in the playoffs. So they ought to be viewing themselves, and I imagine they are viewing themselves as a Super Bowl caliber team, which, again, leads me, I don't think you take a guy late second round if you didn't plan on playing him, although, Jordan Love in Green Bay complicates that a little bit, but I imagine Hurts they took him to have him on the field sooner than later, maybe with Wentz also on the field.
Andy Benoit, Sports Illustrated. Take a look at his breakdown of the draft. What'd you think of Reagor in the first round? I mean, a lot of people, when Justin Jefferson was there, the Eagles fans were, positive that was going to be the pick, and they kind of pulled a little bit of a smudge there and went with Reagor. But, a lot of people, it seemed that the theme for the Eagles was speed in this draft.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what Reagor provided at TCU. He's that kind of player. I think he's not, and I haven't watched every snap he's taken in college. I'll see them all now that he's in the NFL. But, as what you understand the player and the concept of the player to be, I don't think he's a one-trick pony who just runs really fast downfield. He's a genuine outside caliber style wide receiver who is much faster than what the Eagles have had here recently. And a lack of speed on offense has been by far their biggest problem, certainly last year and even in years before that. So I understand why they would do that. And the people that like Justin Jefferson, you have to remember Jefferson at LSU, he played in the slot quite a bit. And he's a little bit of a different style of receiver than Reagor. So the Eagles had their picks. They've researched these guys 1,000 times more than any of us have. They know exactly what they're looking for because they're the ones designing the offense. I would certainly give the Eagles the benefit of the doubt on this, and they got the guy they want.
All right, Andy, let's go to Dallas because they're getting praised for their work. CeeDee Lamb was the guy at 17. A lot of people saw him falling and said, wow, the Eagles could possibly get Lamb. And then here's their arch enemies, the Dallas Cowboys. They slip in. They get Lamb. They also got Trayvon Diggs in the second round. What did you think about what Jerry Jones and the Cowboys were able to do?
I loved it. I thought it was a tremendous draft. They got a lot of value from guys that had fallen. I don't think Dallas traded in the draft, if I recall. I mean, it's not like they were moving around and making big plays for guys. They just had some things go their way. The players who fell happened to fit the needs they had this year, and they capitalized on it. And that CeeDee Lamb pick, to me, is a really good one in particular because they needed a slot receiver, especially given that they're very average at tight end. So they need someone in the middle of the field, and they don't have anyone now. And Lamb can certainly fill that role. He did well with that at Oklahoma, but he can also go outside. And I think that's what's really important because that allows Amari Cooper then to become your slot receiver. And even though Cooper's paid a bunch of money, he's paid like he's a dynamo superstar wideout, he struggles at times against press coverage, and he can get taken out of games at times, literally, and in some cases, he was on the bench against you guys down the stretch in Philadelphia last year. You want to get him away from press coverage. And when he's clean and has free access into his routes, he's almost unguardable. So putting him in the slot gets him away from press, gives him a lot of options as a route runner. I think they got Amari Cooper in a better position now than they did, and they did it by adding a receiver who in and of himself, CeeDee Lamb, that guy's going to be a really good player for him as well.
Andy, we go to the Giants, who had the 4th pick in the draft, and, you know, it seemed like they just were bound to go the safe route. They took Andrew Thomas. They got Xavier McKinney in the 2nd round. They went with another tackle in the 3rd round. I mean, it seemed like a very workman-like draft for the Giants.
And I think it needed to be. Those were their positions of need. They could have used having an extra body in the secondary, because I think it's a better secondary than people realize. DeAndre Baker last year, their 1st-round corner, it had some low lights, and we tend to remember those with corners, but there were a lot of times where you put on the film and you can certainly see why he was drafted where he was. So they have a talented corner there who they probably feel can and will play better. They have a free safety in Julian Love who's better than people realize. Jabril Peppers played well. Adding a guy like McKinney who can line up in a variety of positions, there could potentially be a really nice domino effect with that. You might have a pretty stellar secondary, probably even one that allows you to be aggressive with some of what you do on your blitzes because you're going to trust guys to cover on the back end. And then offensively, they needed tackles because they lost Mike Remmers. They chose to move on from him. So they had a vacancy at right tackle. And at left tackle, Nate Solder, quite frankly, has not played up to his contract. He's very up and down. He's getting a little bit older now, and they can part ways with him at a relatively team-friendly price next year. So they probably, in their minds, needed 2 offensive tackles. In fact, they told us they did because they took one at number 4. They took another one in the 3rd round, Matt Pert out of Connecticut.
Let's move down to Washington, where they had maybe the best player in the draft. They got a kind of a Swiss Army knife wide receiver in round 3. They didn't have a 2nd-round pick. They got Charles in the 4th round. That might be the key to this whole draft for them.
Yes, because they need help along the offensive line. I mean, they need help more than the Giants needed help, especially after the Trent Williams trade and the left side of their old line's in question. So Charles will have an opportunity, the LSU tackle, even though he's a 4th-round pick. He didn't have an opportunity to maybe get on the field this year as a rookie. Chase Young, no problem with that. They didn't need a guy at that position, but you don't fault the team for taking a talent like Chase Young, and I'm sure they'll be all the better for it. The Antonio Gibson pick that you mentioned, where it's kind of the slash running back receiver hybrid guy out of Memphis, I think that's a real valuable tool for them because they are weak at the tight end position. They don't have a starting caliber tight end on the roster. So how do you create schematic mismatches then? Because you can't just tell your receivers to line up and get open. You've got to dictate things with your formations and the way you line up and some of the combinations that you show running routes. You need a tight end or a back to do that. I think having a multi-dimensional piece like Gibson will give them some of those options that they were lacking. And with Dwayne Haskins, that's going to be a real help because usually when you play that way, when you're moving around a multi-dimensional guy, you clarify the coverage as well. The defense responds, and it usually tips if it's man or zone coverage. They'll do that a lot in Washington. That's going to really help Haskins see the field quicker this year because that's what he needs to improve on. He got better last year, but he needs to see the field and read the coverages much, much quicker than he did as a rookie. Gibson can help with that.
All right, Andy Benoit's with us, Sports Illustrated. Check out all the draft grades from Andy at SI.com. And let's take a look real quick. Some odds from betonline.ag. The opening offensive rookie of the year odds. Are you Burrow easily, or is there someone else that stands out? Because this is a great wide receiver. There's a lot of skill players in this first round, which makes the offensive rookie of the year a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, it does. I think it'll be the only running back that has a shot at it would be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And really, when we're talking about potential rookies of the year, a lot of it just comes down to voter behavior because there's 50 people from the AP who have a vote. They're going off of, and I guess I'm one of them at full discretion, but they're going off of, a lot of them are going off of what they see on TV, which means it's the primetime games that they're watching. It's the familiar names, and Edwards-Helaire is going to be in a Chiefs offense that's extremely explosive, that's going to have a ton of space for him on checkdowns because of all the speed they have. His numbers are going to look very good, and he's going to have some great opportunities on big stages. So he's the only guy I could see rivaling Burrow other than maybe Jerry Jeudy or a CeeDee Lamb or Henry Ruggs if one of these wide receivers has a 1,200-yard type season, which is possible. These are good wide receivers this year.
Helaire 9-1, by the way. Lamb 14-1. Henry Ruggs 18-1. For the Eagle fans who didn't like the Jalen Hurts pick, Denzel Mims was on the board. He's 22-1, and Jalen Reagor is 28-1, just to kind of put some more salt in the wound for you guys out there. On the defensive side, Chase Young, Isaiah Simmons, I think those two are going to be so much fun to watch this year. They are the two leaders for the defensive rookie of the year. Are they the two for you, or is there someone else? Because, you got some linebackers that's not a glamour position anymore with Kenneth Murray, Patrick Queen.
Yeah, it's not. Patrick Queen, he's in a great situation in Baltimore. It's a tough situation in that the great part is he has a lot of talent around him. They have a tremendous coaching staff there. Not just the guy who's calling the plays in Wink Martindale, but his assistants and the people who work with the players directly. It's a hard scheme to learn, though. So that's a lot for a guy who I believe he only played 1 year really full-time at LSU. So he has a lot ahead of him, but they like the talent, and he'll offer what they have to offer, or he'll take advantage of what they have to offer there. So that could be one. I'm trying to think of who else would be. Let's say the Lions get better, because I think that's possible. They were not nearly as bad as the record indicated last year. They're a good man-to-man type of defense. If they go 9-7 this year, and then Jeff Okudah is their top cover corner, which he's going to be going into camp, does that get Jeff Okudah on the radar for possible rookie of the year? The problem is when you play man coverage, you don't quite have the same opportunity at interceptions because you're looking at your man, you're not looking at the ball. And back to kind of the lazy voter theory, if he doesn't have interceptions at the end of the year, he might go underappreciated. But I could see football people thinking that Jeff Okudah deserves rookie of the year at the end of the year, and I could see it going to some guy that happens to have 8 sacks and scooped up a couple of fumble recoveries.
Now, Andy, I'll leave you with this. The Super Bowl odds, the draft's here, so they kind of change a little bit. Most of the times, they're not changed all that drastically, but Philly went from 18-1 to 25-1. Is that simply because they drafted a backup quarterback potentially in round 2?
I think largely. I mean, I don't have an expertise on how the lines are set, but as I've understood it over the years, the idea of these lines is to get people to gamble and and have them place bets. So you're going to go off of public opinion, and Philly drops because everybody's talking about Jalen Hurts and, oh man, what are the Eagles doing? The other team that dropped was Green Bay, went from 18-1 to 33-1. And that's the other team that everybody's saying, what are they doing with their draft? So a lot of it's just the way public opinion is right now. I think the Bucks are, 12-1? So the Bucks are the fourth highest favorite in the NFL.
They went from 66-1 to 12-1.
And the Bucks are a much better team on paper, and probably they'll be in reality than they were a year ago. I don't think they're the fourth best team in the NFL. I don't think many people would even argue that they are. They're probably not the fourth best team in the NFC, but their odds are up there because that's who everybody's been talking about.
Andy Benoit, of course, Sports Illustrated, and we appreciate him jumping on board. You can check out all of the picks and all of his grades and thoughts on your favorite team at SI.com, Andy_Benoit, and he joined us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, good stuff. And his appearance was also brought to you by betonline.ag. He was on behalf of them, and those were those odds that we were just kind of talking. I thought it was interesting to bring him on to talk about those odds because I saw the Eagles went from literally what a drop, 18-1 to 25-1. That was one of the biggest drops and dips that we saw all the way through this thing.